I thought you guys were getting even with me for missing a call once.
No, we were. I was actually. Me and Dana. I'm looking for a car, a new car.
Yeah.
So Dana went to like different dealerships today, searching for a car that was affordable. So
that would be about $20.
Yeah, I wish. It's like a whole psychological like mind game with these people, you know. You gotta.
Yeah.
They try to get all this money out of you that you don't have. Basically borrowing against yourself, kind of. The reason I called, because you know Kim Little. I don't know if you spoke to him, but he was looking for you. He was like worried.
Yeah, I spoke to him this morning. Something occurred, and it was because of Bell Canada. They changed his phone number as it appears on my phone to unknown.
Oh, okay.
And I said, unknown, that doesn't make any sense at all. Who would that be? And I'm not allowed, basically, in my deal with the cell to answer any phone call I don't know. So they took them yesterday, and it wasn't until late last night that we had a conversation. I said, you know, that somebody calling back and like that, it's got to be Kim. So this morning I tried calling him, and the phone rang at his end that I could hear, but he didn't answer. And then later on in the morning he called on a different phone, and he said he hadn't heard any phone calls coming in. So they've disabled his cheapest phone and put him on to his most expensive phone. So another ploy.
Yeah, when I was on the phone with him, the phone kept like dropping the phone calls. It would just disconnect all the time.
Yeah. You know, that's what they were doing.
Yeah.
Trying to stop communications. Bell Canada is basically the number one place that will be the center of attention, if you will, in the pineal court.
Apparently they're like one of the biggest, probably the biggest spy in the world. They listen to every conversation.
Well, it is the belief of the cell that there is only one telephone company in the world, and the others all have different names for the purpose of disguise, but in fact, Bell is the company that oversees all the other phone companies, so they can automatically find out what you're saying if they're tracking you, wherever and whoever calls.
Yeah. What was the bell symbolized again? That whole bell?
Pregnant woman?
Isn't it like, because I know when you go into like Philadelphia, is it Philadelphia where they have the cracked bell that was supposed to symbolize that they cracked?
I'm trying to remember what it was.
Was it a pregnant female? Is that what it was?
Yeah, it was like it showed like a woman's body or something, like the way the curves are.
And they also use two letters, and I think it's PT, that they use as a code when they're doing something.
Yeah, we're AT&T down here.
Yeah.
Down here,
But it's not in the name. It's in, if they're doing something in communications and you read it all through, you'll come across something that's been changed PT from what it's supposed to be. And sometimes you're trying to figure out, what does this word mean? But it's because they changed whatever letters were there to PT. That means we were here. We did this. Bell.
Oh, you're saying PT, like Paul Thomas?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And then all this stuff that's going on with, because you're saying phone calls, but, nowadays most of people's communications are digital, right? Google searches and everything time they type in their phone and text messages and all that stuff's recorded,
Yeah.
Every keystrokes recorded.
There is nothing in the world that is not capable of being copied. Doesn't matter whether it's the post office or the telephone company or emails, everything. And they have, of course, computers that can sort it all out, and give them what they want on a minute-to-minute basis.
Speaking of Google, I was going to say, supposedly now they're like under scrutiny now in the U.S. because it was like exposed that they wanted to manipulate the election because they didn't like the turnout from 2016.
Well, there is no doubt that Google is in on it, and it may even be the Moho Discontinuity's preferred communications device.
It's just, I knew about. I said I knew about when you said the go-go. I knew all those years back then that Google was not good news, and now it's coming out that people see the people are realizing the threat that Google is. A lot of these things that we've talked about, not everything, but a lot of the things we talked about, people are now realizing now, 20, 30 years later.
By the way, now that you mentioned that, and before I forget, I've read a book recently that was published in 1996, 5 years after I took the gang in Ottawa to court. Because I took them to court in 1991. And it was about the activities that I had gathered up from 1986 to 91 was presented at the court, and the evidence was confirmed by the witnesses, RCMP and cabinet ministers and whatever I had subpoenaed. And that book, I would say, is at least 95% truthful on how it lays out the problem we're living today. And the part that's not truthful is basically just to hide who's writing this. But the book is called The Story of B. B is in the letter form, like A, B, C, D, letter B. So if you get a chance to read that cover to cover, you will find a lot of interesting things that confirm everything I've been saying. And it was written 5 years after I made it public at the courthouse.
Yeah. It's saying Daniel Quinn,
Yeah.
1996, published December. Yeah.
I'm going to read that book.
Yeah. You know, anybody who's at our level need to understand the past different from what we've been taught in school and church and TV and what have you. And this book talks about the important section of time going backwards to explain today is 10,000 years. And that life before then can go back as far as millions of years. Well, it's millions of years is far back, and that wouldn't be Homo as we know it, you know. But they go into the story, basically, that I've been preaching for 30 years. And they come pretty close to everything confirming what we're saying. And the only thing that I find a little objectionable is that they won't admit to anything underground, and they don't admit to the change over that 10,000 years was actually manufactured by the people underground, and they used the name God a number of times rather than creation, that kind of stuff. But that we all know, so we don't have to worry too much about. So if anybody is doubtful of the history that led up to what they call the Great Forgetting, that's what is used in the book. The Great Forgetting is that we're not told the history of mankind before the last 10,000 years, and that lifestyle exists in every country, like, you know, Africa and South America and Far East, in the concept of tribes, and thousands of tribes still exist, but many, many thousands of tribes have disappeared because they've been incorporated into the one tribe, us, one tribe that changed activities in the world 10,000 years ago. The first 5,000 years, from 8,000 to 3,000 BC, very, very slowly. And then from 3,000 BC to 2000 AD, an increase in speed in what they were doing. and the fact that we have now arrived at the end, those people are no longer the friends of the bosses that put them on the path, and the end of the bureaucratic world we live in is ending.
So the end of the bureaucratic world, but it seems like they're having like new bureaucrats now, right?
Well, it's going to be many, many fewer people than what exists today, 7.5 billion. They don't need 7.5 billion. They probably can do fine in what they want to do if there was 1 billion people. They don't come out and say it exactly, but that's what it basically is saying, and everything else they're saying is that, times are changing. The number of people are not required. You cannot grow enough food to feed the poor because there is no need to feed the poor. What you have to do is stop growing the population, and you can't stop the population unless you cut back on food, because every human being is made up out of food. And if there's no food to eat, the population cuts back. If there's food to eat, the population grows. So over the last 5,000 years, we've seen the population grow because of how they've created a controlled agriculture for the world. So at any time in the future, they could have said, okay, cut back on the food, and you can do it faster, you can do it slowly, depending on whether or not you want to use catastrophic type of endings. But all of those catastrophic probabilities are in place for around the world. So anyways, read the book, and it'll save you at least a few years of learning.
Yeah, I'll look into that. Definitely a book I'll read that on my free time. Read that when before I go to bed or something.
Yeah.
Well, I guess the food as well, like with the the seeds and everything. I think they can engineer them now, right? Where they just reproduce. A limited
everything that is called food has a beginning, and the beginning is in agriculture and controlled raising of animals, but animals go back to food anyways, the same as us. So hunter-gatherers as opposed to gatherers. The tribes basically operate on lessons learned over 3 million years or so, they talk about. But we operate on a lie that required 5,000 years of getting you to forget it. From 3,000 to 8,000 BC was just devoted to make people forget what had occurred before 8,000 BC.
Yeah.
controlling food is the key.
Yeah, I remember learning about when we talked about Gobekli Tepe, when you learned about how they would store all the food in one area, in some religious area, and all the
Well,
people.
you do it behind a culture, and our culture is just, started off as the same tribal culture of any tribe. However, we were picked out to be the worldwide liars about what, in fact, was going on. And what it did is it closed down a lot of tribes that could only find some hope in our culture, and they joined our culture, such as you have, and I was born into it too. So it has to do basically with the gang of people that they manipulated in that 5,000-year period, 8,000 BC to 3,000 BC, were basically very small in numbers, but very knowledgeable, some of them, of course. In many societies, one group is more tending to gather information. And what they knew required that they create a laboratory, inventory, Tories in England, labor and Tories, the two divisions, laboratory. So what you're basically living today is the end of the lie, and that's why I think they published the book. It's the 95% ending of the lie, leaving who was doing it and who continues to do it from the moho discontinuity, because that you're not supposed to know, no matter what society you live in.
This our, I guess the basic gene or genome that exists today, right? It has its beginnings in the, I guess, that desert region over there where Syria and all that is. Is that where the genetic?
Syria to Afghanistan used to be called Persia. Now it has different names like Iran and Syria and Lebanon and all of Iraq was one of the main places.
Now, why on the world stage do they always set Iran as the big act? Is always that tension. It seems like, as far as I've lived, Iran.
Well, it's because Iran controls basically one of the 5 major religions, and that's Muslims. I mean, Muslims since they had the revolution there a few years ago, I don't remember exactly when, 10, 20 years ago. So it's basically centered, and they won't tell you this, but it's basically an agent of India.
Yeah.
And of course, everybody that was sent to North America had the name Indian tied to it because they came from India. you know. But India doesn't want to be known as the country behind all these things, so they blame the Middle East, which includes all the countries there that used to be Persia.
Wow, they did a lot of covering up. A lot of names and covering up. But you're right. Like, people have to look at history differently than what they've been told. That's like a key to all of this stuff.
Well, one of the examples they use in the book is the story of the frog. I don't know if you've ever heard that. English people in England call Frenchmen frogs. Anyways. But the point of the story of the frog, if you don't know it, if you know it, stop me, but if you don't know, what it is it starts off by saying, if you take a pot of water and you put it on a stove and you heat up the water until it's boiling and you throw a frog in it, the frog will scream and jump out as much as it can out of the water because it's being scalded. However, if you take a frog and you put it in a cold pot of water, the frog feels at home and feels like it can stay there. And then you start turning up the heat a little bit at a time, and it's almost like the frog starts to think, well, I'm getting a nice warm bath, and kind of falls asleep while the water heats up to the point where it's boiling and the frog is dead and didn't realize it.
Yeah.
Well, that's the same thing they say we're living.
Yeah.
We were set up 5,000 years ago where nobody could notice the change, and then the pot got warmer, and all of the people over the last 5,000 years are the people who suffer the most in the world because they have to work, whereas tribal people just go around gathering and eating and living. We're the dummies that everybody wants to join because they think just because they see things like, big skyscrapers and everything, that's of benefit to the people who work there. It's not of benefit to the people who work there. They're just slaves who do their own shopping. The building doesn't belong to them, Nothing belongs to them except as long as they are needed in the tasks they've been assigned. They are allowed to acquire things like a car or a home or a country home in the summertime. The privileges of the medium to wealthy people are what they are required. But it doesn't mean that they are not slaves, because it's the work they do that allows them to keep going. But now they're saying even the rich are realizing that money doesn't buy happiness. Money is for somebody else's needs. They don't need, $10 billion in order to survive. They could do very well with $30 million or less. and that their daily activity is not their choice. Most of the time, their daily activity is not fun. Even if you're not employed, what you're doing, if you're a multimillionaire and not working, is boring and terrible way to spend your life, type of thing. Very few people are in a category that's not too much work, too little time, too many people you have to be responding to because they're paying your salary, too many banks who want to control all of your money and take the profit off the top, all of that stuff. So, but read the book. Read the book.
Oh, I will. Oh yeah, I wanted to
tell the world to read the book.
I'll tell them. I'll tell them.
You just did.
I wanted to ask you. I noticed in the video that Zach recorded that your hair was really short. And what's going on, man? You're scaring me,
well,
man.
What happened was the cell needed some investigators that had short hair. And they had to see how they could modify their communications network and had nobody to choose but me. So they asked me if I would, in fact, cut my hair based on adjustments they were making to their communications network and let them know if at one time or other the Catmobile communications disappeared. And that's basically what I did. I cut it a little bit, and a year later a little bit more, and a little bit more, and still I was in communications with the cats because they were adjusting their equipment, whatever that is, I don't know. I don't think it's equipment. It's probably something that comes from their fifth dimension or something. In any event, that's what happened. And what they were saying is we're getting ready to start the work on the farm, and we want, certain things to happen, and you're going to have to come in contact with bankers so it won't hurt that your hair is not as long when you're dealing with that gang. So that's the basic structure of what happened. The other thing that it seems like Zach was interested in is the Toonie, and I've told people before that one of the members of the cell was my uncle Bernard, who was the foreman at the mint, and he was responsible for making all the coins for Canada. And he used to tell me, we're the only ones that make Canadian money. All paper money is all made by banks. But the government of Canada is the only one that makes money by making coins. And the top coin, at about the time he was about to retire, was to be the Toonie, a $2 coin. So that's why I tried to explain it, but obviously not clearly enough to Zach, that when I was on Parliament Hill, a member of the media one day came to me and said, I hear you give seminars. And I said, yes. And he said, how much do you charge? I said, nothing. And he said, you know, the one person who knows most the value of what he has to say is the person saying it. So if you don't charge anything, the impression is it's worth nothing. But I said I don't want to charge anything. People can give donations if they want, but if I'm going to be charging, I want to be charging with something made by the government of Canada, not by the banks of Canada. And the only thing available is 1 cent to $2, and the $2 is the toonie. The $1 is called the loonie. So you're crazy if you have one, but you're not crazy if you have two. So that's something I didn't get across to Zach properly. I don't know if you understand it or not.
I understand. I get it. Yeah.
As soon as they brought out the toonie, they moved the factory, the place that made coins, off of Sussex Street in Ottawa behind Parliament Building next to the Arts Centre there. They moved it to Winnipeg for political reasons. Somebody was from Winnipeg who needed some government activity in Winnipeg, and that's what they did. They moved the making of coins, and it was right after that my uncle retired. And he said to me, I don't know, years are difficult for me to know exactly, but sometime in the past he told me that the project here will begin when one day somebody comes with a box full of toonies. So that's why I put out the bins, so that they wouldn't be the first one to bring toonies. Anybody who now asks me whether or not I charge, I say, well, if you want to use my time, throw a toonie in the tub. And if you don't have a toonie, I'll put another tub where you can throw your loose change.
Is it the same in every country as far as coins and banknotes?
As far as I know. I don't know what's your biggest coin. I'm not talking about gold.
I think we have a Susan B. Anthony. That's $1 coin. And
yeah.
It's more rare. Do we have a $2 coin, Dana? I'm not sure. I think they used to make it, but I think
no. We had a $2 bill. Who are you thinking of? We used to have a $2 bill.
Yeah.
Now the highest one is just $1 coin. We still have
So yours is $1.
Right?
Ours became $2, and you know that in the code number 2 is number 1.
Yeah. Yeah, USA is number 1, right?
Take it for what it means. It's a code to tell you that Canada is more important than most people think in the context of being the agent of the crooks.
Yeah. And they're always telling everybody the U.S. is the most powerful, the best. They say we have the best democracy or whatever, the best military. They say all these. I'm always hearing these things. But,
yeah. And the media keeps repeating that all Canadians have to say is sorry, sorry, sorry. They're always apologetic. And the opposite is true. Behind the scenes, they're giving orders to people all over the world. But it's not to be discussed publicly. They are an agent of British Empire loyalists. And if you'll notice the letters DEL, and there is no L, so that means it's short one, Bell Canada.
Yeah, I was just thinking that. Bell. Huh. Yeah.
It's all a scam. It's always been a scam for 10,000 years. And it just got worse as more and more tribes joined us, quote unquote. And instead of having the pleasurable life they've had, they got suckered into work because the food ended up being controlled.
Food is very controlled, that's true. People are like, oh, why am I working for food? That's why you're working to sleep. So.
Exactly. Everybody, every human being, every animal on the planet is basically built on food. And if somebody controls the food, you'll see what happens. If they increase the food, the population increases. If they decrease the food, the population decreases, because it always basically ends up as to how much food is available.
Yeah. Huh. Oh, yeah, do you?
They say that it's not the people that are hungry that create the solution any more than it is a person who jumps out of an airplane or falls out of an airplane, doesn't spend the time going down building a parachute. The people that are hungry are not able to do much, and they're on a watch list for disappearing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Like, because when you look at, like, as far as, like, on the media, they show, like, oh, look at Africa. This is apparently where everything came from, and it's so rich in natural resources, yet they're all starving. A lot of them are starving, supposedly, because they don't control the food, even though they have all this, the wealthy country as far as resources.
Well,
what do you make of all, like, the stuff now in America that a big debate is they're talking about? We discussed it. You talked about the wall, and that could have been, I think, might have been in relation to the wall at Lake Superior. Is that what is that like what is like the symbolism behind that? This wall.
It's basically a word that hides other words and other activities and events, such as what is going on Wall Street. Don't forget that it's a word that has been used 2,000 years ago. Joshua fought the Battle of Jericho, and the wall came tumbling down. Well, how does a wall come tumbling down 2,000 years ago? It has to be someone from underneath is coming up and causing walls to collapse so the military on the outside can just walk in. That's basically why the word wall is so important to any discussion going on. The walls are coming down, and the 10,000 years is finished, and therefore the people hiding behind Wall Street have to come down. In other places, the walls are going up to keep the people who are hungry from coming to the place that still has food.
Like a survival type of thing, I guess.
Yeah.
Wow. Huh. Yeah.
There is going to be, in my view, very few people needed north of the middle of the planet around the world, except to launch missiles and people into space.
So maybe that's what all that missile talk is about. When you hear, China or Korea launch missiles, we're always hearing about other countries launching missiles. Is that like practice for launching people out?
It's to change people's perspective away from, building chairs and houses and telephones. It's to keep the mind on space. And since many people cannot do it, they have to be replaced. The majority of people who are going to work because they want food, which is the majority of people in the world, don't have time to think about anything else than getting food. So you got to do certain things to get their mind off of themselves. And what you do is anything that has to do with war, pestilence, famine, or disease. As long as you're using that as your structure, you keep everybody off guard, and you want them to start focusing by looking up instead of looking down.
Lately, when you think about the Neanderthals, you reminded me the Neanderthals, they always wanted people to think that they were like from outer space, aliens or something. But now it's starting to be more in public thought that the concept of these you heard the president even talking about it. They were talking about like UFOs, and then on the internet it was a lot of Area 51 and aliens. And in my mind, my thinking was it in the Neanderthals? Are they preparing for 2020 to let people know that they exist? That these
Neanderthalers all exist partly in our genetics.
Yeah.
So do Denisovans. And now they're discovering a number of different groups of people that have transmitted genes. Now, was that done simply by procreation, or was it done by genetic engineering? Well, if you don't believe that genetic engineers existed until this century, well, of course, you won't believe that it's been going on for 10,000 years. But it has. And the purpose was basically what it has achieved. And now that it's achieved it, this purpose changes. The same way as the Big 8-0 in the Bible shows Noah as arriving at a point where there's a flood and the people that are being born drop off dramatically and then have to rebuild from there to get back to the journey they were on before. But what does that really mean? It means that the people with certain genetics were not going to be able to do the job that the genetic engineers wanted done, so they had to kill millions of people and start over with a different recipe to put them on the track they wanted, which is a track that led to Abraham. And then reverse the process coming in the other direction. That's why you have this top part of the chart is like a big zero with somebody having hit it where Noah is, and the bottom part being an 8, which means refining the big O into two smaller O's, leading down to Mary, which Mary is basically coming out of the word mar, M-A-R in Latin, and the Y is 2 in 1. So a return of male-female to a single hermaphrodite is the word Mary. Coming out of the sea is basically a reminder that control is under the oceans. And down under the oceans is the Moho discontinuity. If you look at a slice of the planet Earth, you'll find below the plates of the Earth there's a red line. That's the Moho discontinuity. And that underground establishment basically is where the control comes from. Now, if you take and want to give a hint as to who's coming out of there, you have to look at the word in medicine for doing operations on human beings. What's the word? I always forget that word.
The word for operation.
Hey?
The word for operation, say it again. What
the word for a doctor that does operations.
Surgeon?
Surgeon, yeah. So what comes out of the ocean is called a sturgeon. And it comes out of the ocean and goes up freshwater rivers like the St. Lawrence and the Ottawa River, and then comes on land as a representative taking over. Well, the representative that takes over is called a surgeon instead of a sturgeon. And a surgeon is one given the permission to kill people if they are in fact causing a problem, and the person goes to the hospital. They may have nothing really wrong with them, but they die. And that's my Uncle Wilfred, who was a foreman at the post office, went to the hospital with a broken arm and died. And he's now part of the cell. My Uncle Bernard was making all the coins in Canada, and when they moved it to Winnipeg, he retired and died. He's part of the cell.
Kim Little was actually telling me a similar story, like a guy he knew that was I think he was an officer or something, and when he retired, when the guy retired, he had cancer.
Yeah.
And he was basically saying, like, yeah, they don't want you to collect that money when you get older, so they just kill you off or whatever.
Yeah, it's what one American called useless eaters.
Oh, Rockefeller? No, not Rockefeller. Bertrand Russell. Actually,
no, the German guy that was, I think, at the time of Nixon.
I'm thinking Bertrand Russell or Bertrand Russell or Rockefeller. No,
he's thinking of the war. He's the one that said military men are just dumb, stupid animals.
Henry Kissinger.
Kissinger?
Henry Kissinger. Yeah.
Kissinger. That's it.
Yeah.
Kissinger.
Kiss the boy.
Still alive,
Henry
right?
Kissinger.
Yeah. What? Oh, yeah. Were you? Was it your idea to put that post up the other day? When?
I don't remember.
Jenny.
It was a post. Yeah, Jenny. It's a post called "Conspiracy to Commit Murder," and it's.
Yeah, that's Jennifer. That's Jennifer.
Yeah, that's why I was a little worried, because I heard I put up that post for her, and then Kim calls me and says he can't get in contact with you. I'm like, what? It's like made me.
Well, you know what they did? They this month and last month they cut off a third of my pension. No paperwork, no nothing. They didn't send me notices or anything. They just took it away. And I went to the bank, and the bank manager says, well, we can only tell you about what you got. We can't tell you anything about what they've taken away. But they obviously have taken away, because in May, this is what you had been getting for years. And in June, all of a sudden, $842 or something like that disappeared. And in July, similar amount, a few pennies different, disappears off what they send us at the bank.
So you can't. There's no. I guess process.
There's no recourse when the crooks are the people who are supposed to be doing it. Who do you go to? So Jennifer sent the information to the White House, to the Parliament buildings, to the City Hall, to H&R Block, who prepared the income tax statements for the last 10 or 15 years or so. And nobody cares. Nobody has come to say, what can I do to help? They might ask Jennifer on the net and then do nothing, but they never come here to say, show me the problem. Show me what happened to your house when Hydro pulled the plug. Show me what happened to your animals when Hydro pulled the plug. Show me how you get water when the plug was pulled. And the only way I could get water was to take a taxi, go to town, buy a few bottles, and bring it back. Each time costing $100. So if they don't want you to do that, they cut your pension so you don't have the money to go to town to buy water. And yet they got all of these groups that say they're there in order to help the poor. But it's not true. Because when the police asked me, they said they would take me to one of the charity groups. And I said, well, who are they going to give the money to? They said, well, they'll pay the bill. But the bill is fraudulent. Why are you paying the crooks with money intended for the poor? Why don't you ask the same group of people to come here and have a look and maybe dig a well, pay for a pump or something so that we have water for the animals outside? But nobody cares. And that's what it says in the book. Nobody cares. As they moved along the 5,000 years to 10,000 years, nobody cared. Everybody was complaining, but nobody was willing to do anything about it.
Yeah, I heard you saying that before.
And they write laws to make it worse. Yeah. If you go to Africa and give people more food in one location, does that solve famine in that area? No. Why? Because the food is being eaten by the extra people that are born because they have food. They're not feeding the people with famine, they're feeding a bigger population. Because that's what people do when you make sure they have all the food they need, is they feel better and act differently and make more children.
It's a mess, Glenn.
Yeah.
It's a mess.
A total mess about to end. And that's the good news. About to end. But unless you know what's going on, you're not going to be part of the people that understand and can do things to try and survive. Because you'll be thinking, somebody is going to come and assist me if 1,000 feet of water comes floating down the street. Well, nobody is going to be assisting you, even if you are working in a skyscraper that's 100 stories tall. How many people can be saved on a skyscraper? What's the only way to be saved if there's water up to the 4th, 5th floor? You can't go out. What do? You all run up to the top? What does a million people do on the top of a skyscraper except throw each other off? Can't happen. Can't be saved with what's about to happen unless you know about it ahead of time. And there's no guarantee then either, but at least there's a chance. You don't sit there waiting for somebody to come to your rescue any more than I did. What I did was, how do I survive this? Calling the city hall, calling the federal government, calling the RCMP. I sent an email to the RCMP this weekend and said, when is the RCMP going to start to investigate the attempted murder of myself? Is it only when I'm dead and they have carried my body over to a farm, a pig farm, where the pigs will eat everything, including my bones? If that's your logic, you have a problem that you didn't take into consideration. That problem is the existence of the pineal court, which, when you're put on trial, at the end of this existence, which is not the end of your energy type body, when you're put on trial, the rules they use is how you had set up your rules. So what you did to others and considered to be so okay, even though you were killing people left and right, that's the rule that will rule your trial. And that's what happens to you. And I ended up the letter by saying, may Jennifer have pity on your soul, knowing damn well that Jennifer ain't in the mood.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, well, that's I think about that all the time. The pineal court, like that, for me, that's like real. I know the word means other things, but that's real justice.
That's real justice because it's built on truth. It's not the opinion of the person speaking, because it's his pineal gland that tells what happened.
Yeah. It's just a shame, like, it's like these people, it doesn't seem like, well, a lot of them are going to pay in this life, but
they don't understand, and it's not that they're stupid, it's just they've been programmed. And they don't want to go outside what they believe is truth because the media told them. Well, if anybody came here that's over 60 years old were 70 years old, they would know that Glenn Keely in 1991 was a national figure. And when he moved in to this territory at the age just under 60, no media ever told the people that I lived here. Not that they weren't told. Many people went to the media and said, this is an important figure in the history of our community, that this person is living here. Why is he not being reported? Nobody is expecting, that it'll be anybody applauding, but it's news. It's news. Why are you not reporting the news? And they won't answer.
The news now today is it's people have as far as people believing in the news, many people just don't have any trust in news because they've gone so. It's just they've been caught so many times in lies. Like a lot of people just don't. I mean, still a lot of people believe it, but people are just not believing it anymore. They see them that they're completely shameless in how they conduct themselves, and they're losing money now. They're losing a lot of power in a lot of ways because they're losing money because people aren't watching them anymore. They're going. So now their employees, they're using a lower caliber of employee. They call them like activists who have political ideologies, and they put out even worse news, and that just makes it worse for them, and they just lose all their base.
What most people believe in, Gerd, is the net.
Yeah.
I look at the net. The last time was about 4 or 5 years ago. My story appears on the net next to stories that were manufactured to put me down by the people who caused all the problems. And a stranger looking at the net can't tell the difference between which is the true story. And they usually pick the lie because that means you don't have to do anything. That's what happens on the net. I wouldn't at all be surprised if every religious institution in the world has novices sitting in rooms across the world assigned the task of finding out who says things they don't like, and then making up stories and posting them so that anyone who looks up the truth gets confused by the lies that come with it. So it's absolutely useless when looking at the net if what you're looking for is the truth, because you can't make it out. The two of them are interrelated side by side by people who knew nothing about what was going on.
Yeah.
That's why I discontinued anything to do with the net years ago.
Yeah, I mean, I go on the net and it's just, I don't even. I mean,
the
you weren't
answer
around.
the media gives you is free speech. We can't do anything about free speech. Well, you can't do anything, but you do some things. You omit the truth in many cases, and you allow the lies in many cases.
Yeah, they allow the lies, and they'll create rules. Oh, you can't say this word here because that will ban you.
Yeah.
Now, just recently, me and Zach were talking about this. Supposedly the FBI is now going to, they label conspiracy theory be considered like terrorism.
Yeah.
You can't, and on certain social sites, you can't talk about somebody's religion. You can't criticize religions because that's considered like hate or something. If you can't criticize religion,
even the word theory, conspiracy theory. Well, what is a theory? It's a collection of truths.
Twisted the meaning.
It's not a person's opinion. It's a collection of truths. And yet, when they talk about it on the net, they talk of it as made up by some idiot out there.
Yeah,
It's not the word theory.
Yeah. They twist it to mean to mean like a guess or an educated guess. Hypothesis, exactly. That's what they conflate it with the meaning of what a hypothesis is. And nobody ever points that out on the media. Nobody ever points that out, ever. I'm the only one pointing it out when I speak to people, like on the net or something, and I point that out. They're like, oh, yeah, you have a point. But nobody on the media is pointing it out. I don't see that. No?
Yeah. That's because they don't want to move outside what they're told they're allowed to be in mentally. School, religion, politics, all do the same thing. Politics will say, we'll fix it. And yet they do things like, there's not enough food to feed these people, so we're going to give them more. And then next year, the answer is not enough food to feed these people. Oh, we're going to give them more. And they don't come to the conclusion ever that the more food that's available, the more babies are born. Always. Doesn't matter whether you're an alligator or a mouse or a butterfly or a person. More food, more children.
Means more hunger. So it's just the end of the cycle. Same hunger they had before. Yeah. Wow, that is a
you don't solve the problem by going to the end. You solve the problem by going to the beginning. Anyways, read the book.
Yeah, I'm reading that book and continue reading my own book of life.
Yeah. It's all part of your book of life. Are we done?
Yeah, we're done. I'm going to bed.
I got to get back to Jennifer.
Okay.
All right, Glenn.
All right.
Okay.
Anything I can do, let me know. I'm not always on time, but I'm always there, I guess.
Likewise. Whatever you need.
Yeah.
Okay.
Don't be shy.
Well, I guess we'll try to maybe we can find a way to get you some food and water so you don't have to spend a lot of money.
Anything you can do to help is always appreciated, but I'm not one for asking. Thank you. Good night.
All right.
All right, guys. All right.